Okay, so we are recording today, and I have the slides up for the first chapter, and you can follow along. My best advice to you for this section and for all sections, how we're going to do this is to maybe have your iPad and go ahead and have the slides up, and then write your notes along the side. Anything that I say that you think might be relevant or interesting, you can actually annotate directly on the slides. You can take your slides and then share them to Notability, and then store all of your notes in Notability. So that would be my suggestion for how we're going to do today. Another thing too is that I do, in this particular chapter, I do a game. And so I will ask you, I'll explain the game when we get to it. If you've looked at the slides, then you have a little bit of an advantage. So hopefully you took a look at the slides before class. Even if you glanced over them, you'll have a little bit of an advantage because you'll kind of know ahead of time where those slides are. So when I get to there, I'll explain that. We're going to go to 11:50 today. And I will end the recording and then open the floor for questions if anybody has questions. I should be able to have this video up today, so you can go back if you missed something in notes and rewatch part of it or however you need. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get something up real quick. Okay. Okie doke. Now, let's go ahead and get started in chapter 1. So before we get into anything with any section, what you're going to notice is that we always start with definitions. And that's because even if you know the area or know about it, it could be that the definition that you're familiar with is actually different from the psychology definition. So I'll give you an example of that. The word affect usually means impact. So, how something affects something else. Well, in psychology, the word affect actually means emotion. And so psychology tends to have some words that sound similar or spelled similar or the same, and they might actually have different meanings. And so what we do is for every section, we start out with a series of definitions just so that everybody's on the same page. So the first thing you're going to see here is a definition for psychology. So what is it? And it turns out that over many years, the definition of psychology has evolved. It's changed a bit. And we're going to talk about why that is. We're also going to talk about the beginning of psychology, kind of where it came from and who impacted the field the most. And of course, at the beginning, we never had psychologists because psychologists didn't exist. Psychology didn't exist as a field. So we're going to see how this sort of evolved. Right now, the definition that I'm giving you, and this varies from book to book and person to person, but generally speaking, it's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So it's two major things. It's all about behavior and it's all about mental processes. So about the study of the mind, the study of how we act by ourselves, how we act with other people, all of those different things. So what we're going to kind of talk about is this idea of contemporary psychology. So we're going to talk about the history of where we came from in terms of psychology, and then what does psychology look like today? How has it sort of evolved? We're also going to talk about Wunt and James, who are two big proponents who really influenced the field very heavily and got us to where we are today. So psychology, 100 years ago looked quite a bit different than what psychology looks like today. We're also going to talk about some early schools of thought, some early approaches, and how those differ across the board. And what you're going to find is that shapes how we think today and how you sort of identify with the perspective that you think makes the most sense when it comes to psychology, because there are a lot of different views. People take different stances on how they think things work, and that shapes how you study psychology, what you study in psychology, and what you consider to be actually psychology. So let's talk about the goals of what psychological science is. So a lot of people say, oh, well, psychology isn't really a science, and it's completely subjective and there's no way to study it. And that's completely false. We in psychology use the scientific method just like people in chemistry and in physics and in all the other fields of science and STEM. We use the same processes they do. And so it is a science. That's what makes it a science, is you can use a scientific method. Now, the beginning of this section, we're going to talk about psychology as a science and kind of how it's been shaped. And then the end part of this chapter is all about the scientific method and looking at research in psychology. And so you guys have a video on that, and that's going to be the self-study part of this chapter. So we're going to discuss in class about psychological science and the people who influence the field. And then you guys will take the rest of the chapter to study on your own. So let's talk about what the goals are. So describing, explaining, predicting behavior ultimately will lead to us being able to control or influence that behavior. I'm going to give you guys an example. And I think this is fun because a lot of people can kind of relate a little bit to this. So when I was studying at USC in South Carolina, we had a ton of squirrels on campus. Like I'm talking like it was almost a problem. And we had squirrels that ranged from like almost really super friendly, like you could give them a piece of food, although I wouldn't suggest it because some of them were kind of like a little wild. And you didn't know how to, you didn't know what they were going to do. And then we had some that were just literally the opposite, and that would fly at you from the tree and jump on you. And it was just insane. So if we look at squirrels and squirrel behavior, and let's say we want to use psychology, and you can use it for animals, for people, it doesn't matter. Let's first go through these goals and say, like, how would we approach studying behavior? So first, let's say we want to study the behavior of these particular squirrels on this particular campus. So the first thing we want to do is describe the behavior. Okay. And we would want to what we call operationally define it, meaning that we want to take a behavior and we want to observe it, and we want to understand in what scenarios does it occur. So in the chat, I want you to think about this. Okay. What are the behaviors that you see in a squirrel? So everyone here has seen a squirrel. If you haven't seen a squirrel in person, I'm sure you've seen a video of a squirrel. What are the kinds of behaviors that a squirrel does? Great. Okay, I'll be there in a minute. Interruption number one. We can count them. Okay, so how many, what kind of behaviors? Okay, so we got an erratic. Okay, erratic behavior. So what, even more specific, like what is something that you see a squirrel doing? Okay, hectic. They climb. They do get run over. That is true. They eat. Yes, absolutely. What kind of sounds do they make? They jump, they run, they hide food. Yeah, these are all behaviors that we can observe in squirrels. Absolutely. Run from people, they climb, absolutely. Squeak. Yes, these are all behaviors that we see in squirrels. They run up trees, they run around, they're always like, making little noises. So these are absolutely, and they fight, absolutely, all behaviors that we can observe in squirrels. So let's say we want to take a particular behavior and we want to put the word aggressive on it. Okay, so you might say, what does aggressive behavior look like in squirrels? Some of you have actually put those on there. So they might squeak at each other, they might fight, they might claw at each other, they might bite each other. These are all what we might put under the umbrella of aggressive behaviors. Now, we may see this kind of behavior across all kinds of animals, right? So a lot of animals will scratch and bite whenever they're in certain situations. Toddlers scratch and bite. Okay, right? So little kids do it too. So, and that doesn't necessarily have to be squirrel specific, but that is something that a squirrel does. So for us to be able to describe a behavior, we say, okay, we have a squirrel and it is biting and scratching. And then how do we explain that? Well, we're going to call this aggressive behavior, and we're going to put it under this definition, under this umbrella. And now let's say, how can we predict behavior? So let's sit and watch a squirrel. In what scenario do you think a squirrel might act aggressively? You're not doing anything. You're just sitting on the bench and you're just watching the squirrel. What are kinds of scenarios where the squirrel might bite somebody or something? It might scratch. What do you guys think? So type it in the chat. What do you guys think is something that you could observe that you might think a squirrel would act aggressively, whether it's to another squirrel or to a person? Okay. All right, great. So we've got two males fighting over a female. When it has rabies, absolutely. When it feels threatened, these are all perfect examples. And you're not intervening at all. If someone's taking its food, you have nuts, or they want to get at them, you're taking their food if they're attacked. All these are perfect examples. You're not doing a thing. But what you can do is now you can predict their behavior, because all of you have just predicted the kinds of scenarios where a squirrel might show an aggressive behavior. So for example, like showing dominance, that was one of the answers in the chat. Now we've described, we've explained, and we've predicted the behavior. We've done nothing to the animal. All we've done is just sit and observe. The final step to psychology is being able to control or influence behavior. So now we can actually experiment based off all the information that we've gathered on their behavior. Now we're going to try to influence the behavior. So we've been able to do all of these observations. What would you do to make the squirrel act aggressively? So what is something that you can do to control or influence that aggressive behavior? We've just learned all these things about why they would do it in certain circumstances. So what's something that you can physically do to test your theory? Take its food. Absolutely. What else? Attack it. I think that it might act aggressively. Absolutely. If you try to attack it, throw something at it, come at it, threaten it, take its food. All of these are perfect examples based off of everything that you've learned by just observing the behavior. Bringing a threat near it, like a dog, hitting it, all perfect examples. So now we have just completed the psychological science sort of ring of circles. We've observed something. Now we're trying to influence it, and we can actually create this aggressive behavior in the squirrel by doing these things, like example, cornering it, hitting it, and bringing a threat. Does anybody have any questions about how we approach psychological science? Is everybody good with that? Okay, and you can give me a thumbs up, or if you have a question, you can throw it in the chat. I'm going to move to the next slide. So if nobody has any questions, I'll come back if someone does. So let's look at the origins of psychology. So now you understand, okay, this is kind of how we approach psychology and psychological science. Now let's talk about these fundamental issues. Well, first of all, how do we define this? How do we define what psychology is? You guys just heard me say that from book to book, psychology is defined differently. Some people define psychology as just behavior. Some people define psychology as just mental processes. Okay, obviously the book that we're reading defines it as both. And as we have evolved as a science over time, the kind of ruling attitude has changed, right? So before it was just behavior, and now it's kind of changed to mental processes. So understanding how we're defining it. What is psychology in terms of, like, what should we study? What fits under that definition as subject matter? If we study the brain, is that psychology? If we study consciousness, if we study the soul, is that considered psychology? These are all fundamental questions to understand how we're getting at what psychology is. For example, the human experience. So does it matter what people feel like? Does it matter what their perspective is? If we look at just the, stuff that we can measure on your body, like the physiological response, if we look at your heart rate, we look at your eyes dilating, we look at your sweat, if you're sweating, is that just what matters? Or do we ask you, hey, how do you feel? I'm scared, or I'm nervous. Does that element matter in the scope of psychology? So what element of the human experience may be something that's really hard to nail down and measure? Really, there's no way of knowing some things. You just have to ask people, and they can lie, and they can change their answer, and they can, do all sorts of things, but you have to trust that that's their experience. What kinds of methods do we use to investigate psychology? Can we look at the brain different ways? Should we just look at scans? Should we just look at electrical activity? What are the things that we can use to study these experiences? Also, should we look at animals? Should we look at non-human primates? Does it matter? Does what a rat does in a certain situation in a maze matter? And can we translate that to what a human does in a complex social situation? And these are all kinds of things where people can disagree. So some people say, no, I don't care what a rat does. That has nothing to do with what humans do. And then other people say, no, we can learn a lot from a rat. And that actually can predict sometimes how humans behave in certain situations. What do we do with the information that we learn? Should we share it with the public? What if it changes how we see things? Okay. What if it changes how we behave? What if we create a medication or a pill or a process that can change the way that your brain learns? So there is a process that you can actually stimulate a part of your brain. Okay. It's called TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. And if you're taking a test, okay, and they stimulate this portion of your brain, and then you go to take the test, you actually do better on it after the stimulation. Okay. So they just basically buzz a portion of your brain. It's temporary. It only lasts about a day or so, or a few hours. Okay. What does that mean? Do we now need to offer that to every single person? Would you personally take it if you knew that you could do better on a test with some of the, of the actual electrical stimulation? Is this something that we should let everybody have to enhance their behavior? I know all of you have probably seen movies like Lucy, where they say, oh, you can take this pill and use, 100% of your brain. The question is that ethical? Should everybody be offered something like that if it exists? And by the way, it's an absolute huge myth about that we only use 10% of our brain. That is just the most false thing ever. So just to let you guys know, that's not a thing. Okay. We use all of our brain all the time. Now, we may not use every single cell at once. Obviously, that would run our brains over, and they wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't be able to handle that kind of activity. But if you don't use a cell in your brain, it's going to die. Okay. That's the reason why people have brain damage after stroke, is because if they don't get blood and oxygen to their brain after just a couple of minutes, that part of the brain dies. Okay. So we're always using our brain, even when we sleep, especially when we sleep. And so we're not just using a portion of our brain, we're using all of it, but some more than others at different times. So just FYI, if anybody ever asks you. Okay. Any questions about this slide? Are we all good about understanding the fundamental issues? So unfortunately, we don't have an absolute solid answer. And then this, of course, is all up for debate. So let's talk about where psychology came from, the origin story. So it started with philosophers and trying to understand the mind-body connection. And so at first it was all about monism, where it was like, okay, we're just one being, one thing. There's no separation of brain and body. There's no such thing as consciousness. It really started to evolve to being much more complex as the philosophers started having different views on what the brain does and what the body's capable of. Some of the major schools of thought, and we're going to go through each one of these individually, but just to kind of give you a preview. So structuralism was the first kind of major school of thought. Okay. And this is basically that even our most complex conscious experiences could be broken down into elemental structures or component parts. Okay. Your sensations and your feelings. So, even the most complex feeling that you might have of anxiety, of fear, can be broken down into structures, into individual little pieces. And there's more of, and as we continue learning about psychology, we're going to learn about how other schools of thought came from this, like Gestalt, but we'll talk about that later. And if you take sensation and perception, we'll talk about it a lot. What philosophers used was something called introspection. And they use this to identify those structures, those conscious little pieces of thought. And introspection is just simply trying to understand the pieces by asking you questions to kind of report back what you feel. do you feel hot? How do you experience this moment? Well, I'm scared, and I feel like this has something to do with that. And just, basically talking it out and trying to locate where your feelings come from, and how they come together. So from structuralism, and this is how psychology kind of evolved, is that one group is like, this is the way it is, and this is how we view psychology. And then another group comes along and says, that's stupid. This is the way it is, and this is how your psychology is. And then another group comes along. No, no, no. Okay, so this is kind of, everything is coming from something else. So out of structuralism, functionalism came out, and it was really understanding the function of behavior, the function of mental experiences. Why is it that we do the things that we do? Okay, well, a lot of it comes from the ideas of evolution. Well, we must do this behavior because it's important for the survival of our species. So these are things that are ways to, again, study the experience. Well, then as time went along, people who studied psychoanalysis said, no, 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 it's not about the function. It's all about these unconscious factors, things that we don't understand about ourselves, that we can't control about ourselves. It's about our personality and our behavior. And so that's where psychoanalysis really comes in, this kind of unconscious desires, things that we can't control. We really want to, go and mate with our neighbor, and we don't even realize we want to do that. And so these are all kind of where psychoanalysis comes from. And again, we're going to go into all these in more detail. And then behaviorism came around because they're like, no, it's not about unconscious processes. It's all about what we can observe. They didn't really care about how people felt, or a lot of behaviorists really studied animals, and they just wanted to be able to study what you can observe in terms of observable behavior. So they only studied this as a lot of times as sort of how it pertains to the process of learning. So a lot of behaviorists studied like rats and put them through mazes and say, okay, what happens when we do this and reward this behavior, and we punish this behavior, and understanding how an animal or a human would react to that. And then finally, the final one that we're going to talk about, which brings us really close to contemporary, is this idea of humanistic psychology. So this is all about a person's unique potential for psychological growth and self-direction. There's a lot of understanding kind of about free will and about how we can be the best person that we can be. And a lot of the self-help books and tips come from the bigger humanistic psychology field. And we see things like positive psychology coming from this, and a lot more contemporary sort of things. Okay, so that is kind of where psychology came from. It's sort of origin story. And then now we're going to go into more specific individual parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a game, okay? And so this particular game, I'm going to explain the rules of this. And so this is all about people. So how is it that this particular person contributed to psychology as a whole? And so what you will do is, in the chat, you're going to throw up the name. Okay, so your job, this isn't Jeopardy. You don't have to say who is, right? You can just put the name of the person of which that answers the question. And if you get it wrong, it's fine. You're not going to get any points deducted, but we're just going to see how much you kind of self-studied some of these chapters. And this wasn't a requirement. You didn't have to self-study this chapter yet. This is just seeing if anybody kind of jumped ahead. All right, so is everybody ready? I'm going to go over the rules. This is what I call Who Dat Contributor. I'm going to ask a question about major contributors in the field, and you're going to type in the chat. You can do a direct message, or you can send it to everybody what the answer is. The first person who answers correctly will win. What do you win? You win Pride for the Day. I won that question. Okay, and then we'll do several of these. So the answers are all in the slides. So it's just a matter of what can you find first. Okay, so everybody ready? Give me a thumbs up if you are ready to go. All right, get a couple thumbs up. Good, everybody's good. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the first one. I'm going to read the question out loud. If you already know the answer, throw it in the chat. And so here we go. Who was a philosopher who proposed interactive dualism, where the mind and the body are separate entities? So if you know the answer, you'll just throw it in chat. Okay, all right. The first one got it. Rene Descartes. Good. You guys are good. Okay. So what we're going to do is, so you answer the question, and then the second part, and those of you who are like on iPhones, I'm really sorry. Y'all are like all thumbs right now. So, and again, I'm not giving, I normally I like to give extra credit for this, but I'm not going to do that because I do think it's kind of unfair because we're all kind of on different modalities, and I don't want somebody who's on a laptop to get the advantage every time. So I do encourage you to participate, but you know, try to do the best that you can. Okay, so we're going to go over the answer each time, and then I'm going to go over some other people that's kind of involved with that. Okay, so the answer is correct. Rene Descartes. He was the one who really wrote about this idea of interactive dualism. So interactive dualism is all that about the mind and the body being separate. Okay, they're separate entities and they interact with one another. And this was a very sharp contrast to monism, which was basically that you're kind of one being. So with interactive dualism, you have this interaction between your consciousness and your body, where you could actually experience and produce sensations, emotions, and other conscious experiences. So Rene Descartes was the first one to really write about and formalize, actually like create formulas about interactive dualism, to talk about this idea of consciousness, okay? Now, before Descartes, we had Aristotle. More than 2,000 years ago, he's a Greek philosopher who wrote extensively about topics like sleep, dreams, senses, memory. He was extremely influential to this kind of budding field of psychology and science in general, modern science, up until really the beginnings of true modern science, which started about the 17th century. So, you know, he was the one who was talking about physiological experiences. And again, this is kind of emerging into psychology, and actually used the scientific method and made scientific discoveries where we could actually apply the scientific method to behavior and mental processes. Another thing that we see being a big influence to psychology, and again, that influence of philosophy and understanding you know, what it is today of how we view the body and experience, is this idea of nature versus nurture. So before modern contemporary psychology, most people were on one side or the other. They say it's either nature, it's all about, you know, your DNA, and before they knew what DNA was, it's all about, you know, your physiological makeup, like who you are. Okay. And then there's one side of the thing of genetics, right? And then the other side is all about nurture. No. It's all about your environment. You could take anybody, and they use this term blank slate. Okay. So a person who believes in strictly nurture, just your environment, says, no, you're a blank slate. I can take a person who has a family history of drug and alcohol abuse, who has a family history of mental health issues, of, you know, all these sorts of things, and I can put them in an environment where they have unlimited resources, and they have parents who are, you know, perfect parents, and they're going to raise them up. And what do you think happens if you take a person who has a particular genetic makeup and you put them in a situation where they have the perfect environment? Does it always happen that they have, you know, they grow up to be functioning adults? What do you guys think? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you think that every time somebody who you know, is in a particular environment, that's going to shape who they are. Yeah, I'm getting this in chat. No, definitely not. I'm sure that you guys can actually think of personal examples where you know somebody who was in a really amazing environment. They had great parents, they had a wonderful family, and things turned out different for them. Okay. And it could be that they made poor decisions, or it could be that they had a particular diagnosis, and that changed how they were able to navigate their world. And then we have the complete opposite of that. We have people who grow up in environments that they have everything against them, right? they grow up in poverty. There's just no way that, that they have all these obstacles and all these barriers, and they grow up to be a super functioning adult with making great money and very happy and very successful. So we know now that it's not one or the other. It's nature and nurture. In contemporary psychology, we know it's not an or. Okay, you're not a blank slate. You are your genetics, you are your DNA, but you're also a product of your environment. It's both working together. Now, sometimes one will outweigh the other, because if you're thinking about being one or the other, then that would mean identical twins, for example, should turn out identically, and they don't, right? Even sometimes identical twins can have very different health complications. One might develop cancer and one doesn't. They both might, be in particular situations where one is successful and one isn't. So we know that nature and nurture are both important in this kind of whole discussion. Whereas before, it was honestly, people would be on one team or the other, right? Okay, so any questions about this? And we'll go on to the next question in the game. Okay. Now, I will let you know that part of your first chapter activity is to know a little bit about some of these people, and also to know about some of these perspectives that we're going to go into next class. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Who is deemed as the founder of psychology? So who is the founder of psychology? Oh, we got the first answer. Really good. Up, second, third. Wilhem Wunt. Good old Will, right? Wilhem Wunt. And he, you pronounce that W like a V, okay? So Wilhem Wunt is who we consider as the founder of psychology. So great job, guys. In 1874, he wrote The Principles of Physiological Psychology, which is an absolute landmark text. He's German, which explains the W's and the V's. He was a German physiologist, remember, so that we didn't have psychologists then. He was a physiologist. He was extremely influential because he actually created the first lab, not in the US, but in the world, at the University of Leipzig. And he studied consciousness, emphasized the experimental methods to study and measure consciousness. So he was very big on physiological psychology. Now, someone else who is really important, so after Wunt, is Titchener. So Titchener was a student of Wunt. And so what you're going to see is I talk about these sort of like families, right? And so it's really important to understand that when I say that somebody's a student of somebody, they're coming from being trained by that person. So a lot of times they have very similar thoughts, very similar perspectives. Now, occasionally we do have somebody who really breaks free from that and starts their own thing. So Edward Titchener was a student of Wunt, and we kind of think of it like almost like if your mentor is almost like a parent, right? And so like Titchener's student would almost see Wunt as a grand mentor, right? A grandparent sort of thing. That's kind of like our, your family tree, your mentor tree, so to speak. So Titchener was a student of Wunt, and he developed an approach called structuralism. And we talked about structuralism, right? Focusing on the basic sensory perceptual processes, used introspection to understand how to break those little structures up. So structuralism is a major school of thought, and it was the first major school of thought, where your complex experiences, conscious experience, can be broken down into elemental structures or components. And so this is where it came from. It came from Edward Titchener, who is a student of Wunt. Okay, so we're going to go to the next question if everybody's ready. All right. Who, influenced by Charles Darwin, developed the idea of functionalism? So remember, not structuralism, because that was Titchener. Who developed the idea of functionalism? Okay, got the first one up. All right, anybody else? Yep. Okay, here we go. It was William James. Very good. William James. So William James, one of the other major first sort of psychological schools of thought, was William James is functionalism. Okay, now this was really opposed to Titchener's structuralism, and Titchener and Wunt because they collaborated so much, of course, they're both given sort of credit of structuralism here. So William James is very much influenced by Darwin. Darwin wrote on the Origin of Species, which was published in 1859. He was first proposing that complex organisms evolved from simpler species. So what William James thought, well, it must be that these particular behaviors that we have must have some function for us to be doing them today. For the past 100,000 years must have held an importance to our survival, and it must have held an importance for us to adapt to our environment. We were just talking about squirrels, and many of you stated squirrels collect food. They collect nuts for the winter, right? Well, that behavior must hold a particular function. What function does that behavior hold? So throw it in the chat. Why would squirrels want to evolve this behavior? What function does this serve, of taking nuts and storing them for the winter? What do you guys think? So throw it in the chat. What function would the behavior of squirrels collecting nuts over the winter? Okay, survival. Okay, absolutely. What happens in the winter? They're not always available. Exactly. So they won't have enough to last. They ensure survival when the food goes out. Absolutely. Adapting to the environment. Excellent answers in the chat here. So when you have a squirrel that isn't collecting food, okay, because as someone's pointed out, so they have food when there's none in the winter, they're going to die. So those animals that die can't reproduce and continue on. So they have to, so that particular behavior has a function. So somebody might say, well, what behavior could a human do that has a particular function? Well, maybe it's falling in love and finding a mate. That's kind of important for the survival of our species, right? Of feeling hungry and wanting to eat, of finding some foods being disgusting, because if you eat disgusting food, it can make you sick. These are all have a function. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but that's really hard to actually know for sure. We don't know exactly what some of these functions are. We can guess what they are. And so, of course, more schools of thought started to form, because some people say, well, I don't care about the function. We can't really study that. So let's look at something else. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other schools of thought in this. So let's go to the next question. If nobody has questions in the chat. Okay, so ready for the next one. Who started the first psychological lab in the US, not in the world, in the US, and also founded the American Psychological Association, ABA? Lots of answers here. Hall, very good. G. Stanley Hall. So G. Stanley Hall was, he had the first psychological lab in the US. Very good, very good. And that was at Johns Hopkins. He also founded the APA, which today, by the way, is still a huge foundation. And it's really great because you can actually become a member. You can become a student member, and you can get, if you're interested in it, you can get money to travel to conferences, and you can get small scholarships. It's a really, really wonderful organization. So G. Stanley Hall in 1878 received the first PhD in psychology in the US. And he also published the first US journal, which is solely devoted to psychology, which was the American Journal of Psychology. Now, another really interesting thing. So G. Stanley Hall was a student of William James. Okay. Mary Whiton Calkins was also a student of William James. Now, notice here that I have stated that she was the first woman to earn a PhD in psychology. Okay. Now, I'm very, very adamant about the word earn. Don't use the word receive. Does anybody want to throw in chat why they think I'm using the word earn and not the word receive? So she wasn't given a PhD in psychology. She wasn't awarded a PhD. She earned one. So throw it in the chat and I'm going to continue on. And in 1985, she was elected as president of the APA in 1905. And she was the first woman to hold that position in the APA organization. Okay, so yeah. Okay, people are saying you have to do the work to get a PhD. She did the work. She earned it, but why wasn't she given the PhD certificate and title? Does anybody know? She was a woman. That's exactly right. They did not award PhDs for women in that particular time. Okay. So who was the first person to receive a PhD? So earned and received. Does anybody know? And this is going to be where we're going to end today. So who was the first woman to actually earn and receive? Okay, absolutely right. Margaret Floyd Washburn. She was the first to actually receive her PhD. Okay, and so she was a student of Edward Titchener. So if I ask you a question on your test, make sure you are really careful about what word I use. Do I say it was the first to earn and receive, or the first to receive, right? The first person to actually earn it. So make sure you read that very carefully. I'm going to stop my share now because we're right at time. We'll pick back up next class right where we left off. I am going to end the record, and if you have questions, please feel free to come off the mute and ask, and we will see you next time. As soon as I can get this record. Here we go. Hold on one second. We're going to get this record off. There we go. Okay.